In order to dive into the Pullman Strike of 1894, we must first look into George Pullman himself. He was the one who founded Pullman Palace Car Company in 1867, which manufactured sleeping cars and operated them under contract. It was so revolutionary to comfortable railroad travel that Pullman became a household name, and they operated on almost every major U.S. railroad. You can just see how luxurious and comfortable these cars must have made the passengers feel at that time period. He then created Pullman City, a company town on the south of Chicago where workers were required to live. There, it seemed as if Pullman regulated their lives. He set their rent, the libraries charged money to use, paychecks were from the Pullman Bank. Even the churches had to pay rent, which just shows how he wouldn't even let people pray for free. He made them live in a town, abide by his rules, and pay his demanded fares. In 1893, a depression hit. As orders for Pullman sleeping cars declined, layoffs increased, and wages fell 25%. However, Pullman still charged the same high rent even though he cut their income. As if life wasn't hard enough for these workers, Pullman's administration was just completely unfair. On May 11, 1894, 3,000 Pullman workers decided to take a stand against their mistreatment and went on strike. They walked off the job, risking everything to push for higher pay and lower rent. Striking was very risky. It could ruin your life. You could get fired, you and your family would have nowhere to live, and your employer could put you on a blacklist, which would ensure that you wouldn't be able to find work. For the workers to recognize that they needed to take these risks to draw awareness to their situation just shows how serious it was. Many of the strikers belonged to the ARU, which was the American Railroad Union founded by Eugene V. Debs. On June 26th, ARU members refused to let any train with a Pullman car move, except those in mail cars, because Debs didn't want federal troops to get involved. It's a federal offense to interfere with U.S. mail services. In response to the strikers, 24 railroads formed the General Managers Association and announced that no one could tell them who to hire, who to fire, or how they should pay their workers. By June 29th, 50,000 men quit their jobs. Crowds of people who supported the strike began stopping trains. Soon there was no movement on the rails west of Chicago. Fights even began breaking out. The railroad realized that to break the strike they needed help from federal troops, but they could only get help if the president agreed. President Grover Cleveland said that he would only send the aid of government troops if a governor requested them. The Illinois governor did not want to request troops because he believed that workers should have the same rights as their bosses. The railroad managers started flooding newspapers with stories that made the ARU sound like a violent and lawless gang and portrayed Debs as radical. As tensions rose, railroads hired strikebreakers and scabs. On June 29th, the angry railroad workers in Blue Island felt that they were being discriminated against and began destroying yards and burning anything that was flammable. Attorney General requested President Cleveland to send federal troops into Chicago immediately to break the strike that showcased the violent path. On July 2nd, only obtained an injunction from the federal court saying the strike was illegal and workers could not interfere with their bosses' businesses. When the strikers did not return to work the next day, President Cleveland sent 12,000 federal troops into Chicago. The president declared the strike a federal crime, which enraged the strikers, and rioters began stopping trains, smashing switches, and setting fires again, and many were killed and injured from bullets. On July 10th, Debs and 3 other union leaders were arrested for interfering with the U.S. mail. Debs realized that continuing the strike would be a lost cause because of the federal troops. On August 3rd, the strike was declared over. Debs went back to prison, the ARU was disbanded, and Pullman employees signed a pledge that they would never again unionize. Most railroad workers resumed their old jobs and received the same wages as before, and some workers were put on a blacklist. Industrial workers' unions were stamped out until the Great Depression. The Pullman Strike was very important to U.S. history because it was the first time a federal injunction had ever been used to break up a strike. The strikes was one of the largest in the country's history. It paralyzed the West as grain and livestock couldn't reach markets, factories were shut down because coal couldn't be shipped to them, mobs overturned, looted, and burned freight cars. Although many applauded Cleveland's decisions to break the strike because of the expedition of mail and preservation of society, he was resented by the working people since it seemed like he sided with the railroad. Businesses now had a new anti-labor weapon that stopped union growth in the 1890s. The court injunction, which was upheld in the Supreme Court. Debs, who saw the workers' lives could never improve until they had government power through strength in numbers in elections, turned to socialism and formed the party once out of jail. But overall, the strike drew awareness to the labor problem America was facing. Reformers began to search for new ways of protecting the public interest. Today we celebrate Labor Day because of these efforts made by unions to improve working conditions. We are able to celebrate and recognize what the labor movement has gained for us, like paid vacations, short hours, health care, safe working conditions, and better wages.
It was a terribly violent strike. It was not a happy day for labor. Government, being politicians, wanted labor on their side, and so as a concession, they then passed legislation authorizing a Labor Day, first Monday in September from then on.